Good Friday morning, friends. My name is Tim, and I will be the host of this week's installment of the Backyard Naturalist, brought to you by the Urban Ecology Center here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's April 4th. That means we are squarely in spring, whether you look at it from the astronomical or the meteorological perspective. March came in like a lion and left like a lion. April showers are looking very lion-like, producing the dandelions that will pop up in our backyards. I'm still waiting for my hepatica and pasque flowers to show themselves in my front yard. I think they're maybe happy to be hiding a little bit longer since the weather hasn't been too friendly lately, and we do have potential snow in the forecast again. But here we are. Tuesday was April 1st, which was, of course, a day of pranks, and the wonderful team that I am part of did a nice little number on me that stretched my confusion boundaries, but it is no longer April 1st, which means no more tricks, no more jokes. It is on to some very serious backyard natural history, and I can't think of a better way to go serious and real than to do an episode on the Hodag, the celebrity from Rhinelander, Wisconsin. So I hope you are able to sit back and enjoy a warm beverage from the glow of your device, your screen, as we bring you episode 29 of season 6 of the Backyard Naturalist, Hodags of Our Fathers. But not before we spend a minute with a heartfelt thank you to our subscribers out there. You keep this journey of learning alive, and every week we are here with you almost without fail, almost every week. We are so appreciative of you and your presence and your support. So thank you. I love hanging out with you before and after this. There are a few levels of subscriptions, of course. There's a seasonal subscription, the annual subscription, and the super subscription. So among the other benefits of the super subscription, it allows you to attend free of charge our monthly-ish program, Green Spaces Familiar Faces. Each trip has a new green space and a new familiar face and lots of smiling faces. The next installment is tomorrow, April 5th, where the green space is Esterbrook Park in Shorewood, and the green face, the familiar face, is the nationally renowned author and editor Chuck Hagner, whose accolades are many, but include, first and foremost, being a great human being, and second, he is the author of many books, including the American Birding Association's Field Guide to Birds of Wisconsin. He recently retired as the director of Bird City, Wisconsin, and for many years he was the editor-in-chief of Bird Watching magazine, which some of you might remember by its previous name, Birders World. Chuck chose this time of year because he has a particular interest in fox sparrows, which is also one of my favorite birds. It's a big, chunky, beautiful red sparrow that just really looks badass. So weather permitting, we'll be heading on that walk tomorrow morning, and you can register online or just email me for information, or if you're having trouble registering. But I've been really enjoying this new program for both the natural beauty and the human connections. And then speaking of natural beauty and human connections, the Urban Ecology Center is heading back to Costa Rica in August. We've got a fantastic agenda plan that includes soaking in natural hot springs, zip lining, hanging out by a volcano, seeing an amazing array of diverse wildlife from sloths to monkeys to grasshoppers the size of your hand. We have 2 additional information sessions coming up. The first one will be online Tuesday, April 15th, and then the second one will be in person at our newly renovated Washington Park on Wednesday, April 16th. It is truly one of the coolest places I've ever been and is my second home, and I'd love to share that experience with you. So shoot me an email if you're interested, or you can find more information online. And then finally, there's one more very unique opportunity coming up on April 29th. We'll be leaving Milwaukee, heading up to Plover, Wisconsin in a plush UEC van, checking out some great natural areas, and then spending the evening at a hotel so that we can wake up early in the morning on the 30th to see the hard to believe it's real, almost comical, it is comical, courtship display of the greater prairie chicken. They dance, they sing, they boom their hearts out, and then we witness the spectacle from a blind that is run by the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. So we'd love for you to join us in Plover, in Costa Rica, and at Esterbrook Park. So join us for the trifecta. If you have any questions at all, I think these are going to be fantastic experiences, and By attending any of these, you're supporting the UEC's mission of connecting people in cities to nature and to each other. Okay, so we are here to talk about the hodag. So what is a hodag and why is this important? And this, of course, isn't a picture of the actual hodag or an actual hodag, but there are very few actual photos out there. I think I've found them all. So for a lot of the times, you're just going to have to deal with the artist renditions, such as this likeness that you can find outside the Chamber of Commerce in Rhinelander, Wisconsin. In fact, I'm pretty sure there's an online map that shows you where all the hodag likenesses are in that area if you ever want to take a hodag tour. But we always start these sessions with our route through the tree of life, and we want to see where the hodag fits in kind of a taxonomic sense. So first of all, the hodag is a eukaryotic animal. It's an eukaryotic organism that is also an animal, and within the animal kingdom, the hodag has you'll notice a lot with the Linnaean system, there's a lot more layers into it than we've learned, and we've seen that example a lot through here. So we're not going to go kingdom phylum this time because we group some organisms like fish in they're polyphyletic, and so the hodag belongs to a group known as the fearsome critters. So it's not like a phylum, but it's a multi-phylum group. They're animals, mostly animals. Some kind of straddle the line between animal and plants, but they are known to inhabit the wilderness. And this particular group is native to areas that are in the north of the New World, particular areas that have been heavily logged by Europeans in the more recent history. So particularly around logging camps is where we see most of the evidence of some of these fearsome critters. So this is a relative of the hodag. It's called the hugag. So it is native to northern Minnesota, western Wisconsin, up into the Canadian wilds towards Hudson Bay. The interesting thing about the hugag is that it has jointless legs, which is an adaptation for something, but it makes it hard for the hugag to that in combination with its extended lower lip makes it almost impossible for it to graze. It's about the size of a moose, and it's related to moose. So, but it can't graze, so it subsists on a steady diet of pine knots that it can get right off of the branches of trees. And if pine knots, if you've ever kind of messed with them, they have that pine pitch that kind of oozes. And so when the hugag eats the pine pitches, or those knots, that pitch becomes part of its system, and then it sweats that pitch from its pores. And I'm sure there's an adaptive reason for that. Unfortunately, the hugag cannot lie down, so it has to lean against trees to rest. And sometimes they're so big they'll lean against whatever they're leaning against. They kind of destroy, whether it's a log cabin or a tree. Sometimes they'll just with they're not huge, but they're certainly heavy. And a moose is very heavy, and sometimes it can knock things down. So um, that's one example of the fearsome critters. Another example is the hide behind. The hide behind is a nocturnal fearsome critter, and it also wanders the woods and is able to conceal itself very well. So it can kind of move about, but as soon as you try to look directly at it, it's very good at averting your gaze, hiding behind, as the name suggests, the hide behind. It can hide behind an object, a tree, uh, a cabin. And it's also very good at hiding behind you, just kind of following your head movements so that you're never actually looking at it, and it's usually directly behind you. Unfortunately, it allows the hide behind to stalk human prey and attack very easily without warning. So this is one of the more dangerous of the fearsome critters, and usually you hear about them from, again, logging camps. If somebody fails to return to camp, one of the first worries is that there are hide behinds in the area, and it's pretty gruesome. They drag the humans back to their lair to be devoured. So it chiefly, and I apologize, this is nature, it chiefly subsists on the intestines of its victim, And so some of the loggers that were in danger learned that if that the hide behind has a severe aversion to alcohol, and that's one way you can ward off a hide behind is if you have good strong liquor. It's kind of like the DEET for mosquitoes, because it can smell that liquor and it'll tend to avoid you. Unlike the mosquito that smells with its feet, the hide behind actually smells with its nose and it can smell the liquor. So that's a good way to kind of protect yourself from a hide behind. Hide behinds are actually notable in the Harry Potter universe. They've been mistakenly grouped from, we're talking about the you know the groupings, the family tree, the phylogeny. Sometimes they're mistakenly grouped as fantastic beasts. Fantastic beasts tend to be New World, and the fearsome critters tend to be Old World. It is not a fantastic beast. It is a fearsome critter. So try not to make that mistake like J.K. Rowling did. One characteristic that is shared among all fearsome critters and also fantastic beasts is that they're very rarely seen by non-magical humans. They do their best to stay away from us, so there's very rarely photographs. Sometimes you get grainy photographs, um, but that doesn't mean that they're not heard. In fact, they're often heard. So even though we can't see the hide behind, you can hear it. Sometimes it makes like a hissing noise, like a snake. So if a lumberjack heard that, then they knew they were in trouble. And then another fearsome critter that kind of takes us away from our idea of the critters all being fearsome is the tea kettler. So you can see here to scale for size and also where its native range is, the tea kettler is hardly ever seen. It's nocturnal, it's very good at hiding, but it is often heard. And they kind of resemble a dog or cat, about the same size with short, stubby legs. They only walk backwards, and they do issue steam from their mouths, and it makes kind of a whistle. So very rarely has a lumberjack ever seen one, but many have heard them when they're out in the forest or just sitting around a campfire. And again, the tea kettler illustrates this important point that not all fearsome critters are what we would call fearsome to humans. Many of them are not dangerous to humans. The tea kettler, like many wild other animals, would rather just stay out of our way and are only really dangerous if provoked or cornered. Then you have the flitterics. The flitteric is dangerous not because it tries to harm humans, but because it is a relative of the flying squirrel. The problem with the flitteric is it flies so fast with so little control that it's been known to kill humans and even animals as big as the giant oxen that you sometimes have at camps. And it's not because they're trying to kill the ox. It's just because once they start flying so fast, anything that moves into its way, it can't really avoid, and it can just it's messy, just a huge collision. It's like a missile. So they can be dangerous in other ways. Uh, Another notable fearsome creature that's notable in part because it's not native to lumberjack country. So these are New World species, and most of them are in the Northwoods of Wisconsin and Minnesota, but you do have some in other parts of the country. So this is the side hill gouger. It has two very short limbs on one side of its body and two very long limbs on the other side, which is fairly awkward in most situations, but is really good when you're on a steep slope. So if you have really short limbs on one side and long limbs on the other, it makes it much easier to move around steep slopes. It comes in very handy. The only problem is that it only allows the side hill gouger to move in one direction on a mountain. It can't really turn around and walk the other way because then it'd have the long limbs on the wrong side of the body. So they are thought to be responsible for creating geological formations called hoodoos. You can see here in Bryce Canyon National Park in Utah. These are all thought to be made by side hill gougers, going kind of around and around, which is all they can really do. What's really a tragedy is when you have a right-limbed side hill gouger giving birth to a left-limbed offspring, because then it's really hard as a parent to raise a young that can only move in the other direction, opposite of you. Um, so there are so many examples of the fearsome critters group, and we can't go through them all. It'd be like going through all the birds in the world. There's just not enough time here today. But you may have noticed up until now that all of these examples are mammals. So you may think that all fearsome critters are mammals, and that's certainly not true. So again, like fish, fearsome critters are polyphyletic. So there's not one group that holds them all. They're spread throughout most of the major phyla. So there are some fish, like the upland trout. The upland trout is a fish species that actually evolved to hate water. It tries to avoid water at all costs, and so it's learned to fly in the air. It nests in trees like birds. It is purported to be one of the best tasting fish, but they're really hard to catch. Uh, you have fish that are fearsome critters. You have birds. There's the philly which is a crane that has very few feathers, and so to keep warm, it flies upside down. There's the pinnacle grouse, which only has one wing, and so just like the side hill gouger, it can really only fly around hills in the same direction. And then the gillygaloo, which has a remarkable adaptation of laying square eggs, which prevents them from rolling down hills. So a lot of these, they're kind of, a lot of the ones that at least are surviving today are kind of in areas that are a little harder for humans to go into, and it's one of the reasons that they're still protected from humans. Another of my favorite fearsome critter is the goofus bird, which flies backwards, and it also builds its nest upside down. So maybe that's a future early April topic for the Backyard Naturalist. Some fearsome critters are snakes. Uh, Most naturalists probably tell you this is an urban legend that snakes bite their tail and roll down hills. It's absolutely not. There is the hoop snake, which has evolved to do exactly that. And then you have the Squidicum squee, which is also a herptile. And as menacing and fearsome as this critter looks, it is absolutely afraid of humans. It is very shy, and any times that it hears or sees, it's got really good eyesight, someone approaching, it takes a deep breath and then swallows itself whole. And so we never see them. You have the hang down, which is another nocturnal fearsome critter. We're pretty sure it's a herptile. It behaves like a sloth. It's native to North America, and they fetch a really high price on the open market for their hides, mainly because they're so hard to catch. So again, there's so many more examples of these. It would really be fun to kind of go through more of them, but we are here today to talk about our hometown hero, which is the hodag. So this is one of the few photographs of a hodag, one of the only times in human history that we've documented a fearsome critter. It has a very interesting evolutionary history. And to do that, you have to take a little bit of a step back because going back to the blue ox, so I think most people have heard of blue ox, particularly from Babe. There are, again, I'm giving you most of, as is the case with a lot of these, I'm giving you most of these accounts from the Western perspective. There are certainly other cultures that have accounts of these animals. Um, but so Babe was pretty sure. We know a lot of people know the story of Babe the blue ox. There was another blue ox who had a very different story, and it's a sad one. It was the ox was abused by its master, and just heavily. And when this ox died and was cremated, there's a huge pile of ashes, and it is believed that from these ashes is where the first hodag rose. And so the ancestral hodag, the prototype hodag, um, I mentioned that not all fearsome beasts are dangerous to humans, but it's not the case with the hodag because the hodag evolved from an animal that had borne incredible abuse at the hands of humans. And so really the hodag is kind of a personification of all those years of abuse and is really set for a lot of retribution against humans. And that's why they're so dangerous. At least they were so dangerous, particularly to humans. And the first Western documentation of a hodag was in 1893 by Eugene Shepard, of course, in Rhinelander. And he described it as having the head of a frog, the grinning face of a giant elephant, the thick, short legs set off by huge claws, the back of a dinosaur, and a long tail with spears at the end. Even though it has lizard-like properties, the hodag is a mammal covered in fur, and its Latin name is Nasobatulus hystrivoridatus. A fully grown adult is about 300 pounds, 7 feet long, and Its range is very close to the range of white pine forests. So there may be an important association with white pine that we have yet to discover, and we're not sure why most of the cases of the hodag are kind of in this region of the world. It just could be that, extirpation in other areas. We're not entirely sure. And so Eugene, displaying this immense hubris that the European humans have helped continue, they they Eugene decided to round up a group of local people and try to capture a hodag. It was really difficult. They finally were able to do it with dynamite, but then even though they killed it, the dynamite also burned the body badly. And the only photos they could get were the charred remains, other than this one. The only evidence, I should say, were the charred remains of the beast, the critter. And according to Shepard, it was the fiercest, strangest, most frightening monster ever to set razor-sharp claws on the earth. Undaunted by that first attempt, Shepard really wanted to take the beast alive. And so 3 years later, in 1896, he was finally able to capture one alive. He enlisted the help of some bear wrestlers in the area, and they were able to subdue the beast by a not so gentle method of putting chloroform on the end of a long pole and working their way into a cave, and then the beast was overcome by the fumes. So he was able to capture a live hodag, and it was first displayed at the Oneida County Fair in 1896, where thousands of people came to see it. He also displayed it at a shanty at his house, and he also took it kind of around mainly the state of Wisconsin. Unfortunately, the creature died before scientists from the Smithsonian Institution were able to come and officially catalog the creature. And also, unfortunately, it is believed that the hodag might now be extinct. And part of the reason that is believed that they're extinct is because when the European settlers came to the area, the hodag gained a taste for white bulldogs. And so that was they quickly specialized in white bulldogs as prey items, and they became so specialized they kind of lost their ability to hunt other prey. And so, as sometimes happens in ecological relationships, the predator became, again, so specialized and effective that it destroyed its prey base. And that could be the main reason that scientists today think the hodag might be extinct. It certainly lives on as the official symbol of Rhinelander, as the mascot of Rhinelander High School. There is a Hodag Country Festival held in the middle of July that is about to celebrate its 50th anniversary. It attracts more than 50,000 people annually and has hosted some lesser known performers like Garth Brooks and Merle Haggard and Emmylou Harris, Kenny Rogers. So, big deal. There is also a fairly newly created Hodag Heritage Festival that began right after the pandemic. Is kind of a way to get people outdoors again, and that's in May. It's part of Hodag Heritage Week, and you can buy things like dark chocolate Hodag paws and Hodag creme de menthe lattes. It is, though, important to point out that there are many people out there who do not believe that the hodag has gone extinct, that it just got back to doing what other fearsome creatures do well. It realized how terrible these Western humans were, so it kind of went back into hiding. And it's a very quick to evolve new adaptations, and some of these now have helped it with its current success. So you'll notice that the hodag has spikes on the tail. Normally they're used for defense or for, attacking. But we found out now that if you've ever been to a campfire, particularly with kids or maybe Vic Vargo, you'll notice that sometimes marshmallows will disappear from the s'more building area, and we usually blame the kids that are around or Vic. Maybe, hey, they snuck a marshmallow when they're not supposed to, but it is important for us to consider before we blame that hodags have learned not only to love marshmallows, but also to roast marshmallows. And so they use that tail now. First of all, they're, again, incredibly good at sneaking around silently, not like some other of the critters. And then they can use that long tail not only to steal a marshmallow, but to sneak it over to the fire and roast it without you knowing it. So again, before you blame someone, just remember there is, it could be not your child, but a Hodag's child. And this is actually one of a fairly accurate depiction of a Hodag puppy. And the Hodag has also learned to love golf. And so when golf balls go into the woods, you can't find them. It's probably not your searching ability that's to blame for not finding them. It's much more likely explanation that your ball was taken by a Hodag, because then when we leave the courses, they come and play again using that versatile tail for as a golf club. Hodags have adapted to the modern human world by switching their diet from white bulldogs to fish fries and potato pancakes. So again, if you want to support your local Hodag, it might be worth leaving a little bit of extra food out for them. Apparently, this one is a little harder to prove, that Hodag tears make the best lemonade in the world. But unfortunately, it's very hard, almost impossible to get a Hodag to cry. Similar to dragons, I think dragon tears are some of the most sought after, extremely rare elements in Earth, but it's just really hard to get. So Hodag tears, dragon tears, but it'd be cool to find that out someday. And really what these recent adaptations show us is that over the decades, the Hodag has gone from this fearsome predator of humans to a hider from humans, and they've evolved to become more of like a parasite on us. So it's not really our safety that is a threat these days, but it's our sanity that's a threat, because they're so good at stealing things from us, like sunglasses and keys and wallets, important documents that otherwise we'd probably never lose. So that's become a kind of a bane of our existence. You can enlist St. Anthony to help you find these things, and you can probably blame the Hodag for moving them in the first place. They don't even want them, they just want to kind of mess with us. So they're also implicated in stealing fish off of fishing lines. So that big one that got away, it's not your fishing, it's most certainly the result of a Hodag taking it off your line. And Boom Lake, Wisconsin, purportedly formed after a Hodag saw humans doing a cannonball in lake, and so the Hodag tried to do this in kind of a small puddle, and it formed this lake. They're very dense. They're not super big like a dragon, but they're dense, and so when they tried that, it formed this lake in Rhinelander, which you can visit. In 1959, John F. Kennedy visited Rhinelander before he was president, and he received a replica Hodag that it is said he used for inspiration when he wrote his famous inaugural address. So we can thank a Hodag for that. And in 1967, there is no physical proof of this, similar to the Loch Ness, but there is evidence that Hodag snuck onto Lambeau Field during a pivotal play in the Ice Bowl to help the Packers, kind of like a third string center. But again, all the images are really grainy, and mainly from the steam the players are breathing out of their mouths, that it's really hard to document this as proof. And even as recently as 2009, there's controversy. It is rumored that the prize-winning milking goat at the Wisconsin State Fair was actually raised by a Hodag. Then the human took credit for it. So there's a lot of controversy, kind of a goat gate, and whether the actual winner deserved the prize, or enlisting help from a Hodag is probably not a good thing to do, the right thing to do. My kids learned about Hodags from an episode of Scooby-Doo, an episode called The Hodag of Horror. Definitely worth the watch. And just a reminder that we don't know if the Hodag is in fact extirpated, but it's certainly living on in a cultural sense. And then there's another kind of just interesting perspective that I hadn't thought about before, with particular with fearsome critters, is that humans are very good at transporting species from one area of the world to another. And when they do that, they can kind of become invasive pests. So like, the gray squirrel, garlic mustard. It is also very likely that humans inadvertently brought Hodags to Europe, probably, stowed away on an airplane or something. And now they're, or at least were, considered an invasive species that learned to adapt to Eastern culture. So in the old world, Hodags are considered fantastic beasts. They're trying to take credit for it, even though we all know they're not. But one advantage of this inadvertent transfer to Europe in particular is that the Europeans have learned a little more about the Hodag for science. So they learned that particularly the magical community in Europe discovered that Hodag horns do have magical properties, so when you ground them into a powder, they first of all can make a person immune to the effects of alcohol, which could be really beneficial in certain situations. And they allow the consumer of the powder to go without sleep for a full week with no adverse effects. So in Europe, hodags had adapted to prey on mooncalves, which is another true fantastic beast, not a fearsome critter. And hodags are really attracted by the essence left behind during the mooncalf dance under the moonlight. In fact, one of Rubeus Hagrid's students brought a gallon of mooncalf essence into the forest to lure and trap a hodag to give as a gift to Hagrid. And unfortunately, after Hagrid had gone through all this length to obtain the special food from Wisconsin to feed the hodag, he realized the hodag had a greater taste for biting Hagrid's fingers than the Wisconsin food. This has got to be an apocryphal story because I can't imagine a universe where British food tastes better than the food from Wisconsin. So you really got to take this one with a grain of salt. If you talk to people in the old world, they will claim that the hodag became so out of control in Europe that they eventually had to confine them to a reserve in Wisconsin. So I think that story is just full of a lot of holes, but there is still a jury's out whether it's technically a fearsome critter or a fantastic beast where it's native. But I'm pretty sure we all know where the hodag originated. Go Wisconsin. And so that pretty much wraps up this April 4th edition of the Backyard Naturalist. And I hope you all have a wonderful week exploring the green spaces in and around your backyard. And we'll see you next week when we're going to explore another invasive, fearsome monster, which is the kudzu of the South. So we'll see you next time.